Obrigado, chat. Today, I feel Portuguese, chat. I feel Portuguese today, chat. Obrigado, man. Shout out Portugal and shout out Manchester United's new manager, Ruben Amorim. Let me say this, yeah? I've been a little critical of INEOS in the last few weeks. I wasn't impressed by their decision to stick with Ten Hag into the new season, but regardless, I said, let's see what happens. I was not impressed whatsoever in terms of how long they've came to this decision to fire Ten Hag. I think at the very latest, it should have been the last international break. And I think allowing him to manage 3 more games was a mistake. However, I have to say I'm impressed with the timing of how they've all done it. Now, once they made the decision, I think the timing has been very, very impressive. In terms of in the last 24 hours, or whenever you guys are watching this, but at the time of speaking, in 24 hours, Man United have announced the sacking of Erik ten Hag. They have approached a team 9 wins from 9, top of their respective division, approached them for their manager, paid the money required to activate his release clause, no dilly-dallying, secured their manager, and all but announced him already. In fact, Sporting already did it for them. And for that, INEOS, respect. That's brilliant. That's the kind of speed and ruthlessness and ambition that I want to see from my board, from my ownership. So I'll be real. I haven't been too impressed about INEOS in terms of how they dealt with the Ten Hag thing. But now that we've put that chapter behind, it's a new chapter for INEOS as well too. And this now, for me, is the manager, the first manager of the INEOS era. I don't count Erik ten Hag for me. I don't count him. He was leftovers. This is the first manager of the INEOS era. So welcome, Ruben Amorim. I'm a bit confused because for them to have gotten him this quickly, they had to have been talking to him from before the international break, maybe even in the summer. So why not just bring him in during the international break? Me personally, chat, I think INEOS really wanted to give Erik ten Hag every single chance they could. I think they wanted to back this guy until the very end, just so they could say they did. And that's exactly what they've done. Now, me personally, I don't agree with that decision, but that's what they did. But let's talk about Amorim before we get into the tactical videos. As I kept saying before, even when we fired Ten Hag, the number one question that people kept asking me is, who do you want then? Who do you want? Who should Man United hire? And I kept saying, for me, I don't really have a name at the top of my head. I have a criteria. I have a list of things that I look for in a successful Man United or a potentially successful Man United manager. But if you ask me a name, I can give you names of managers I like, but that doesn't mean I think United will hire them or whether they should hire them. Amorim, to be honest with you, wasn't someone I really thought of at all. I have to be honest. And it's not because I never thought he'd be a good United manager. I just didn't really think he'd be attainable, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, chat. And that's part of the reason why I'm very happy with the fact that INEOS have kind of gone for him. He seemed unattainable. He's currently top of the Portuguese league. 9 wins out of 9, cruising in that league. For all extents and purposes, Sporting and himself could very easily say, no, I want to finish out the season. I'm about to win another league title. And yet, INEOS have gone, allow all that. We know there's a release clause on the table. We're going to basically not tap him up, but we're going to speak to him. We're going to convince him about our project. We're going to convince him about why he should come manage Man United. And we're going to get it done in as little time as possible. So I think in that regard, it's a very, very ambitious move. They could have very easily talked to the likes of Xavi, which I'm sure they did, the likes of any manager, to be honest with you, that's available. But the fact that they have gone to another club, and Sporting, by the way, are a big club. They're not Man United in terms of global outreach, but Sporting are one of the biggest clubs in Portugal. They're one of the more historic names in football. They're no laughingstock. So the fact that INEOS and United have gone to that club and basically exerted their financial muscles, like basically flexed them and gotten their guy in as little time, I think it's very, very impressive, and it's very, very diligent from the board. Now, let's talk a little bit about Amorim, what I do know. I do know that before he got there, Sporting were under, or obviously they play in the Portuguese league, but the Portuguese league for the longest time, 20 years even, were basically under a duopoly of Porto and Benfica. Now, the big three in Portugal, and I remember this because I watched back in the day this thing called Football's Greatest. And they used to be on Sky, but even in the US, they showed it all the time. I've watched every single episode with my dad. They had a Football's Greatest for players, they had a Football's Greatest for managers, and they had a Football's Greatest for rivalries. And I think the one that I watched was Sporting versus Benfica. I think it was that one. I think it was Sporting versus Benfica. I think that's the rivalry because they're both Lisbon clubs. And I remember them speaking about how historic that rivalry was and how big of a footballing institution in Portugal Sporting are. And they like to be called Sporting. They don't like to be called Sporting Lisbon. Until Porto kind of came into the equation, broke that up, and then asserted themselves as like the third powerhouse in Portuguese football. And for the longest time, Porto now became, especially when Jose came, and then from there they never looked back. And then Benfica as well, they're always a big powerhouse in there. But Sporting for a long time massively fell behind those two. It was always Porto and Benfica. For 19 years, those two basically had a stranglehold on the league. Until Ruben Amorim was hired, and he managed to break that 19-year duck and when Sporting their first league title in nearly 2 decades. He then followed up the trick just a few seasons later. So when he got there, they hadn't won for 20 years. He's leaving today, a few years later, with 2 league titles, and if the season were to end today, he would have won a third undefeated. They are currently undefeated in the Portuguese league. That's very, very impressive. No matter what you think, in isolation, that's impressive for any manager. That's a good resume for a guy who, by the way, is 39 years old. Like, was that his first job? I'm not 100% sure. That's crazy. Now, the reason I'm a little hesitant to not get too carried away with that, as great an accomplishment as it is that I remember what the narrative was when Ajax had Erik ten Hag and we were after Erik ten Hag. Now, Erik ten Hag had a similar, not so much in terms of like Ajax are maybe a bigger powerhouse in the Netherlands respective to Sporting in Portugal. Like Ajax are the top guy. In Portugal, it's probably Benfica, right? But what Ten Hag did at Ajax was absolutely ridiculous. He basically took them a few years ago. They hadn't won the league until he came back. I think he won them 5 in a row, or maybe it was like 4 in a row, and they would have won one if it wasn't for COVID. He took them to a Champions League semifinal, produced some brilliant players, and consistently had them hitting crazy points tallies in the Netherlands. And I remember when we hired Ten Hag, that was one of the biggest drawing points. Look at what he's doing with Ajax. Look at the style of play. Look at the results. Look at the trophies. So just because Amorim is doing it in Portugal, it doesn't mean he's going to be an immediate success at Man United. That's all I'm trying to say here. However, the Real Lettuce M says people comparing the Ten Hag appointment to the Amorim appointment are looking at this very surface level. Amorim has only the 3rd biggest budget and overcame the duopoly of Porto and Benfica, whereas ETH had the biggest budget in the Netherlands by far, and also not to mention the Portuguese players and coaches translate to the Premier League better than Eredivisie players and coaches. That I do agree, because I've always said this, even before we hired Ten Hag, even before we started reading Ajax, I've always been apprehensive of the Dutch league. Not about their managers per se, but the talent, I'm always apprehensive, because I do feel that the levels in physicality between the Dutch league and the Premier League is as big a chasm as any league there is in Europe. Nothing against the Dutch league. I'm sure the technical level required to play at that league at a high level is extremely high. But the intensity levels and the physicality aspect of the Premier League, for me, blows the Dutch league out of the water. Now, the Portuguese league, I've always also said, I think that the track record or the success rate of players coming from the Portuguese league to the Premier League is pretty high. Genuinely, it's pretty high. You look at the Manchester City monopoly that this team has kind of built. A lot of it is built off Portuguese league players, whether it was Bernardo Silva, Ruben Diaz, obviously João Cancelo for a while. You look at Liverpool, they've signed some players from the Portuguese league that have had huge success for them as well too. You look at Luis Diaz from Porto. Darwin Núñez, I know he splits opinions, but for the most part, he's a good player. He's not a scrub. And I'm sure I could think of a few more, to be fair. But I see an easier kind of path to success going from the Portuguese league to the Premier League, more so than the Dutch league to the Premier League. That I've always maintained. Yeah, obviously you have the likes of Otamendi, Painha, Ederson, Mateus Nunes, David Luiz, Ramirez. I just think Portuguese players tend to translate over to the Premier League a lot better than the Dutch league. I've always maintained that. I think this is a question mark though, Oliver. I agree with you. Why was it that so many clubs chose not to go with him this summer? Obviously, Liverpool, I think, were highly linked with Amorim. I'm not sure the complete reasoning behind why they went with Arne Slot. Obviously, that's paid dividends. He's had a crazy start to the season. But why was... Because I think Amorim was viewed as a bigger priority than... I think he was higher on their list of managers, no? Or maybe I'm chatting shit. And I know West Ham as well wanted him too, but I think West Ham pulled away because I think they felt disrespected that Amorim kind of gave priority to Liverpool. Liverpool didn't do it because Michael Edwards wanted total control and Amorim was reluctant. Wages too high. Liverpool ruled out Amorim because he was wedded to playing a 3 at the back. Interesting. But yeah, look, like I said, I'm open to learn, but more importantly, I'm open to the idea of him. Like I said, he wasn't a manager that before anyone came to my head. Like, for the first reason, it's because I just didn't think he was going to be available or attainable. But I think it's an ambitious move. I think the track record speaks for itself. That doesn't require any kind of like insight or like watching games. If you're just looking at the amount of trophies that he's won, his win rate, which I actually screenshotted earlier, his wins, draws, and loss record at Sporting reads as follows: 227 games at Sporting, 161 wins, 33 draws, 33 losses. 2.2 goals scored per game, 0.8 goals conceded per game. Those are excellent numbers, facts. And you look at what they're doing this season as well, too. 9 wins from 9. I think I read something like 30 goals scored, 2 conceded. They lead the league in terms of passes completed, possession, chances created, like everything. They're basically storming through the Portuguese league. And like I said, that's not easy. Like the Portuguese league is a competitive league at the top level between Porto, Sporting, and Benfica. So for them to kind of be that dominant this season is pretty impressive. Bizarre LFC says, yeah, he did some weird thing to force our hand to pay him more money and we cut the ties. It was about money. He wanted too much money and revamping a lot of the squad. Well, if it's about revamping a lot of the squad, he's probably going to come to United and look at a lot of the squad and say, yeah, this needs revamping. And here's the thing, too, right? Amorim has a lot of leverage in this situation because Man United are the ones coming to him in mid-season. They need him. And obviously, he is ready for this next big jump. You can't, I mean, if you want to be considered an elite, all-time great manager, like go and achieve big things, with all due respect to Sporting, you aren't going to stay at Sporting your entire career. It is a good starting club, especially like it's a great starting club. Let's be real. Some people go manage smaller clubs even before that, but to start at Sporting and have this much success early on is huge. But just like Jose went from Porto to Chelsea, just like Villas Boas went from Porto to Chelsea, just like all managers do. They start. Rafa Benitez went to Valencia, then he went to Liverpool. Amorim was always going to leave, so Man United coming for him. Oh, he started at Braga, in fact. Okay, my fault. I didn't even know that. I genuinely had no idea. So he started at Braga, went to Sporting. But even so, it's like career progression. The next step is to try and go to a big European giant. So when Man United come knocking, even though I said the other day, look, United's name doesn't hold the same amount of weight as it did a few years ago, it still holds a certain amount of weight that a Sporting manager is going to look at Man United and say, yeah, I want that job. But let's be real as well too. Man United are coming to him desperate. They are coming to him desperate. They need a fix this season as well as long term. They haven't afforded him a transfer window. He's going to come in and say, okay, I'll come in, but on my own terms. I'm going to want this player, this guy. I don't care if you bought him 6 months ago or a year ago. He's not in my plans. And we'll talk about all that stuff too in terms of players that we believe. Guys are talking about Casapia. Man, who the hell are Casapia? Who's that? Oh, they're 9th in the Portuguese league as well too. God damn, I'm sounding like a casual right now, man. So Amorim started young then. He's 39 years old. He's coached 3 jobs before Sporting. So he coached Casapia, Braga, Sporting. Okay, he only spent 1 year at each of them. Okay. Retired at 32. I remember actually he went to the World Cup in 2014. I remember seeing that picture all the time. But anyways, with the little information that I kind of know about the guy, I do like, just initially, off first thoughts, I'm a fan of the move. I didn't really look at anybody in the market as like, we need to get this guy. For me, if we could have got Nagelsmann, it would have been brilliant, but it's a very, very difficult get. And as for the likes of Thomas Frank, Iraola, look, I have a lot of love for those managers. I think they're very, very able managers. And maybe they could have cut it at United, but the reality is as well too, there are potential question marks. Anybody who says they wouldn't be convinced by them, I wouldn't be too harsh on them. Like they've never managed in Europe for a bigger team. They've mostly managed at like a mid-table level in the Premier League. Like going to Man United is a huge jump. And Amorim, we're looking at a guy who's managed seasons in the Champions League. He's managed games in the Europa League. He's won league titles. He's managed a team who are considered a giant in his respective league. So maybe it's an easier kind of shift to managing United. One thing I would be interested in is how will he deal with big superstars, right? Because Ten Hag, I think that was something that he definitely struggled with. Managing at Ajax, he's the top dog there. No one at Ajax is bigger than the manager. You come to a club like Man United, and in theory, no one should be, but also at the same time, you're managing superstars. You're managing guys with millions of followers on social media. You're managing guys that have crazy entourages behind them. It's a completely different beast entirely. So, and he's a 39-year-old, by the way. He doesn't have the stock in the game like a Jose Mourinho. He doesn't have years of experience like other guys. So the worry, I guess, could be how will he deal when it comes to managing big names. But at the same time, too, I think the fact that he's a young manager appeals to me. As a 39-year-old, it means he comes with energy. It means he comes with youth. It means he comes with fresh ideas. He's hungry. He's energetic. I'm a fan of that. I am a fan of that. And you might say that doesn't mean too much, but I don't mind that whatsoever, to be honest with you. I've listened to his interviews, which again, I told you guys, for me, the biggest thing Man United need to get right when hiring their new managers, charisma, personality. Do they have what it takes personality-wise in terms of managing a big club? I listened to the guy speak. First of all, I'm automatically more enticed by the way he speaks than Erik ten Hag was. I can already listen to his interviews and not be droned out, basically, compared to Erik ten Hag. So for me, that's a massive step in the right direction. So this is a short video that sums up his career, if you want to watch this. Yeah, let me see this.
Why had Sporting Lisbon, struggling financially, paid Braga €10 million to sign their coach, Ruben Amorim? It was the 5th of March 2020, and Amorim was 35 years old. He'd only been a top-flight coach for 10 weeks, and on top of that, he was a former Benfica player and fan. So what were Sporting thinking? Well, 2 years on, nobody's wondering anymore.
Is this the next Jose Mourinho? God damn. Don't get me gassed, chat. Don't get me gassed. Is this the next Jose Mourinho? Ay. You guys know how I feel about Jose, man. That's my favorite manager ever. Don't gas me about these next Jose Mourinho.
Has achieved in Portugal is very significant. 3 Taças da Liga, and in 2020-21, Sporting's first championship for 19 years.
Ooh.
Speak to those who know Amorim about how he's managed to turn Portuguese football on its head, and they'll all point to one thing: his personality. A charismatic, natural leader.
I'm sold! Chat! I'm sold! I just heard the P word. I'm sold! Wow! I'm sold, chat! This guy's got personality.
To those who know Amorim about how he's managed to turn Portuguese football on its head, and they'll all point to one thing: his personality.
Yeah!
A charismatic, natural leader who teammates and colleagues wanted to follow. Amorim may have only been a good player rather than a great one, but he did leave an impression on teammates. He was the joker of the dressing room, always talking, always entertaining, and always getting his ideas across. His step into coaching seemed inevitable.
Chat, I'm sold. Honestly, I'm sold. I don't have to see a single tactic video. I don't gotta see nothing. I don't gotta see who will Amorim sign. None of that. This guy's got personality. This guy's got charisma. This guy can influence a dressing room. This guy will bring people to war with him. I'm sold, chat. I'm sold. Wow.
Coaching course at the Faculty of Human Kinetics at the University of Lisbon. His first job came soon after, at third tier Casapia, for the start of the 2018-19 season. Amorim hit the ground running there, impressing with the intensity of his training sessions. But with Casapia at the top of their league, Amorim's work did not go unnoticed, nor did the fact that he was coaching without the required licenses to do so. The club were fined and threatened with a point.
See, I like that. He's willing to bend the rules, whatever it takes to win. No coaching license, no problem.
Deduction.
I like that.
Ruben quit, but the team he left behind still won promotion at the end of the season. The next step was to take charge of a B team, and there was plenty of interest. He met with Benfica, but Amorim decided to say no. Instead, he took over Braga's B team and won 7 of his first 8 games there. And in December 2019, when Braga sacked first-team coach Ricardo Sapinto, with the team stuck in 8th, they turned straight to Amorim. Now, the first challenge for any new manager is to convince his players that his ideas are right. This is how the manager generates buy-in, and how, over time, their ideas become those of the players too. This skill is perhaps the most important in management.
As a Sporting fan myself, it's the most excited I've ever been. I love him. He's
Ruben
so great,
is a coach that
honestly.
brings everyone together. Paulo Meneses, Braga's head of recruitment, told the Athletic's Jack Pitt-Brook. He has a very strong personality, but at the same time, it does not fracture the group. He's very smart in human relationships and communication. These are Ruben's strengths as a coach. Another source says the same. His superpower is not the 3-4-3, it's communication. With the media, the fans,
I love this guy already. I love this guy already, chat. I love this guy already. This video was like tailored for me. It's tailored for me, chat. Wow. It's like they made this video a few years ago saying, what is this random American guy gonna say about us in a few years? His superpower is not the 3-4-3. It's communication. Oh, man. I'm sold, chat. I'm sold. I can finally listen to press conferences in enjoyment now, man. Let's go.
Even now, his players at Sporting watch his press conferences intently. Ultimately, Amorim lasted even less time as Braga's first-team coach than he did in charge of Braga B. He was appointed on December the 23rd, 2019, and left for Sporting on March the 4th. He won 8 of his 9 games and drew the other. Braga beat Porto 2-1 away, Sporting 1-0 at home, and Benfica 1-0 away. On top of that, in the Taça da Liga, Braga beat Sporting 2-1 in the semi-finals and Porto 1-0 in the final.
So hold on, he was there for 9 games. He was there for 9 games, and in those 9 games, he beat Porto, he beat Sporting, he beat Benfica, he won the semi-final, he won the final. Yo, that's crazy, chat. Is that what they're telling me here? Bro, he was at Braga for 9 games. He won 8 out of them. He beat the big 3. He won in the semi-final and won in the final. Yo, this guy's crazy, man. That's kind of crazy. That's very impressive.
3 opposition, 5 wins. all within a 4-week period, and Braga's first trophy in 4 years.
Appreciate you, Snook.
It's without
Appreciate
doubt
you
one of the
subscribing.
most remarkable short-term improvements that any recent managerial appointment has produced. So, when Sporting sacked Silas, 6 months into his tenure, they had a decision to make. They could go for another one of the same old names, or they could take an expensive gamble on Amorim. All they had to do was pay the €10 million release clause.
Wow,
No small
so a
task,
team has
given
already,
their
so Sporting paid the 10 million release clause to get him, and now United are doing the same. Man.
Sized financial issues. Amorim's first game as Sporting coach was a 2-0 home win against Deportivo das Aves, their last game before the enforced COVID-19 stoppage. When football returned in June 2020, Sporting went on a 7-game unbeaten run, pushing up to third, but defeats at Porto and Benfica in their last 3 games saw them finish 4th.
Ooh.
However, that spell did give Amorim the chance to try out some of the young players. Nuno Mendes, Joelson Fernandes, Mateus Nunes, Eduardo Quaresma and Thiago Tomas. The summer that followed also gave Sporting the chance to add more quality. Right wing-back Pedro Porro, in on loan from Manchester City.
Wow.
Former Real Madrid and Real Betis backup keeper Antonio Adam, and former Wolves youngster Pedro Gonçalves. One-time West Ham United midfielder João Mario joined on loan from Inter Milan a few months into the season. But of course, even with these new additions, the squad was still not on the...
That's good eye for talent. Look, I'm not going to give him all the credit for it, right? Because I'm sure Sporting have a very good recruitment team, but those are a lot of good players that even since they've left Sporting, they've done pretty well. That's impressive. Those are some good players right there.
Level of Porto and Benfica. But it was enough for Amorim to work with. He knew how to bind them all to his ideas, a rigorously well-organised 3-4-3 which presses high and barely concedes any chances at the back. His playing style is clearly pragmatic, Meneses explains. He is a studious coach, with a great capacity for work and a lot of intuition. He's contagious with his will to win and with the conviction that only with hard work from everyone is this possible. And 2 things stood out about Sporting that season. The first was their defence. Marshalled by the 31-year-old Sebastian Coates, they conceded only 20 goals all season.
Wow.
It was, according to theanalyst.com, the best defence in Europe, permitting an average of 0.73 expected goals against per game.
Wow.
The second point of interest was how good Sporting were in the final minutes of games.
That's good, first of all. The first thing he just said about how defensively strong Sporting are, because I look at this United team, right? And although I want my manager to bring back exciting attacking football to United, I think it's important that United continue being a side that look to be on the front foot. Defensively, bro, under Erik ten Hag, we've been an absolute mess every single time he's tried having us play any kind of normal level of football. The first season he was there, we played a deeper line. We had a decent defensive record. But you look at the organizational skills that Erik ten Hag has kind of had on the defensive side of Man United, we've been an absolute joke defensively, whether it's in midfield, the amount of space that we kind of give up in midfield, that teams can easily play through us. Defensively, the level of calamitous mistakes that we concede in terms of crosses into the box, balls in behind. It's an absolute mess at times. So, in terms of a manager that has a good pragmatic side to him, that he's clearly shown that he can organize the defense to a high level. I welcome that.
Stoppage time in 9 of their league games, winning themselves 9 extra points in the process. Perhaps the most important win of all came on April the 25th. Sporting had drawn 3 of their last 4 games and felt Porto breathing down their necks. They went away to an in-form Braga and, after 18 minutes, had Gonçalo Inácio sent off. But they dug in, and then, with 9 minutes left, Mateus Nunes' goal won them the game. 3 more victories after that won Sporting the title, to go with their Taça da Liga trophy from earlier in the season. It was their first championship since 2001-2, and after a generation of Porto and Benfica domination, it felt like a transformative moment in Portuguese football. So what's next for the agent of that change? Amorim has been mentioned in connection with the Manchester United and Tottenham jobs in the past, but he wants to stay and keep winning with Sporting. Only for so long though, as the interest will keep gathering around a coach destined to be one of the major names in European football over the coming decades.
That's very impressive. That's good to know, because I'm not, like I said, I'm a novice when it comes to Amorim. I'm learning on the job. I'm learning. But I have to say, obviously the video is intended to gas him up. It's a propaganda piece. Obviously, it's not like they're being objective here, but they're going to probably paint his pros more than his cons. But I have to say, that's impressive. That's a very impressive rise to stardom from Ruben Amorim. And in fact, since then, he's actually gone on to do some incredible things, like since then as well too. You got the second league title that he won. You look at the players that have left the club and he's replaced them. You look at the I think they knocked out Arsenal a few years ago in the Europa League.